Fidget toys. Alright, this is my fidget toy. I struggle to stand still, so it helps me feel a little bit more comfortable. Don't get distracted by the pencil. So, my name is Meghann. I am the co-founder and development director of Now She Speaks. We are a nonprofit providing advocacy and education related to domestic violence and human trafficking. So, I'd like to start out by saying I am a peer advocate, which means I have lived experience surviving violence, right? I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I am a survivor of childhood sexual trafficking. I am a survivor of domestic violence as both an adolescent and an adult. And I am a survivor of interpersonal violence, which I'm going to get into in a minute. Now, I know I've mentioned that I'm a survivor, right? But I don't like to call myself a survivor. I am a thriver. I have thrived despite the violence that I grew up with. I have gone to college. I have traveled the world. I have found so much healing. I have my own apartment with my own car, my own bills, and I got myself. I am thriving despite the violence that I have experienced. The violence started in childhood. The violence was sexual abuse and physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Now, children who are victims of violence have a hugely increased risk of later being victimized in domestic violence and human trafficking. So, to start out, I'd like to give some definitions. We're very often aware of what domestic violence is, abuse in the household, right? But what is interpersonal violence? This is abuse between two individuals who are in a platonic relationship, such as family members, friends, roommates, and professional relationships. Intimate partner violence is when individuals are in a romantic or sexual relationship. As an adult, I experienced interpersonal abuse. I was roommates with one of my family members. This is a family member who abused me as a child, sexually and physically. I was still in denial. I thought that this family member was redeemed, healed, a different person. Growing up, my parents used to tell me that I looked at this family member with rose-colored glasses. Yet as an adult, I sit and I wonder, why is it that my family has aligned themselves with a perpetrator and neglected the type of support that I need as a victim? And I think to myself, it is no longer I who looks at this person with rose-colored glasses. It is the rest of my family who views this person as redeemed or healed or a different man. I grew up witnessing this person sexually abuse not only myself, but his girlfriends. I witnessed him physically abuse his girlfriends. In fact, I put myself in the middle of him abusing one of his girlfriends because I thought that he wouldn't hit me as bad. I went home back to my parents' house that same evening with bruises on my arms and on my head that I covered up with makeup so my parents wouldn't know that that family member had beaten me, someone that I didn't think they would go that far. So as an adult, we had an apartment together. We were roommates. I thought that this was going to be better. I thought, I'm an adult now. You're not going to hurt me like that. In fact, you've apologized, right? It was a facade, and I was misguided. While being roommates for an estimate of 2 years, this person abused me financially. They expected me to give them money that I didn't have, and then told me that I promised them money that I would have never promised to give, especially when I was a college student working a part-time job, not even having enough money to actually pay my own bills, but trying to get past. This person verbally abused me. They would scream at me. They screamed at me because I ate 2 slices of pizza one night. 2 slices too many, screamed at me. They would scream at me in front of the other people who lived in the house, and I always wondered why. Why did the other people in the house just watch? Why didn't they see that I was a victim of abuse? This person physically abused me while we were roommates as well. They psychologically manipulated me into believing that I deserved to be screamed at for eating 2 slices of pizza. That I deserved to be screamed at because I overslept. I deserved to be screamed at because last night when I got home at 1 a.m. from waitressing, instead of parking on the street, I parked in the driveway behind their car, and in the morning they had to wake me up to, switch cars. Screamed at me. It's 1 a.m. I was tired. I just wanted to go to bed, right? But somehow that was my fault. I ended up coming forward and not only telling my family, but also telling my friends that this family member had been abusing me. And I didn't even say everything. I only said a little bit. But this person, the perpetrator of violence, incredibly horrific violence that I witnessed them commit, not just against me, but against 5 other women. I didn't receive the support from my family member that I thought I should have. In fact, the person who abused me damaged my reputation with my family members. They told my family members that I was crazy, that I was projecting childhood abuse onto them, that I was confused. My memories of being abused by that family member was misguided and confused related to someone else who abused me. I never dissociated when I was being abused as a child. I know who abused me and who didn't. I was never confused. So how could somebody say that I'm crazy, I'm mentally ill, I'm having hallucinations because I'm confused between who abused me? So not only did this person lie to defend themselves, they manipulated our mutual family members to convince them that I was in the wrong. And then I noticed a lack of support, a lack of validation. In fact, I received aggression from some family members who wanted me to keep my voice silent related to what happened to me. And it stopped me from speaking for a while. I left that house eventually. It was a scary moment. It really was. But then I continued to experience post-separation abuse, where this person told not just the family members, but friends and other people in the community about how crazy I was, thinking that it wouldn't get back to me. But it did, and I had to deal with that, and I had to learn that my experiences are fact, they are truth, and it doesn't matter if someone else doesn't believe it, or they're in denial, or they don't want to believe that the person they love is capable of horrific violence against women. The truth is truth. Reality is reality, no matter how painful it is. I wanted to share a little bit about my experience before I talked about the intersectionality between domestic violence and human trafficking. This is something that we often don't realize, even as providers. I promise you, my providers out there, you have worked with someone who is in a domestic violence relationship and was being trafficked. You saw the signs, but you may have not known what you were seeing. 3/4 of women experience domestic violence prior to being trafficked. 39% of traffickers use a romantic relationship as a strategy to recruit women by manipulating them, by saying this is for love, by making it casual, or saying that they're struggling to pay the bills. We have to be more aware of this. We have to identify this. There is a lot of overlap between domestic violence and intimate partner violence relationships and human trafficking. There is power and control. There is isolation from family and friends, emotional manipulation of the feelings of safety, of love, of being cared There is financial abuse, financial control on all aspects. And we've heard a lot of that today from women who are being financially abused. And that was a barrier preventing them from leaving. There are threats and intimidation, physical and sexual abuse. There is psychological abuse, that manipulation that prevents people from thinking they can leave, or maybe even thinking that they want to leave. There is the exploitation of vulnerabilities by predators of domestic violence and human trafficking. They also weaponize the children. If you leave, I'm going to hurt the kids, or I'm going to hurt the kids in front of you because you did something that I wasn't happy about. We have to recognize this. There is also post-separation abuse, which I already mentioned. The risk of being murdered after leaving a violent, abusive relationship skyrockets when the victim leaves. And this is overlooked. We've had people talk about how, what is the effectiveness of a restraining order or an order of protection? If it's really effective, why do we see so many victims who end up being violently attacked after they've left the relationship? And then the cycle of violence, which is, again, something that I experienced with this family member when we were roommates. There would be a building up point where there was tension and minor conflicts. Then there would be an explosion, the yelling, the physical assault, the targeting and manipulation. And then there would be a cool down. Things are settling a little bit, we're minding our own space. And then the honeymoon period, where this family member would approach me and apologize, say they're never going to do it again, maybe buy me a gift or treat me special, give me a hug and comfort me when I was upset by what they did. And then the cycle would repeat itself. We're all, as victims and survivors, have experienced that. I want to talk to providers and our system advocates for a minute. I ask, if you're working in the domestic violence field, you need to learn the signs of human trafficking. You are working with victims of trafficking and you don't realize it. You need to be able to identify the risk factors so you're able to take action based off of that. Providers, we have to be culturally curious, culturally sensitive, culturally humble, and culturally accommodating. I myself, as a white woman, will never understand the different perception of domestic violence in a black household and how that impacts them differently than me. Yet I think that it is extremely important that I educate myself and make sure that if someone doesn't feel like they would connect best with me, I connect them with someone else who is more culturally in tune with that person's needs. That is so important. We need to educate our domestic violence clients on human trafficking because they might not even know that that's what they're experiencing. They might have no knowledge or awareness. We also need to recognize the barriers to receiving support or leaving, especially when the human trafficking dynamic is part of the domestic violence relationship. And lastly, for providers, we need to have patience for victims of domestic violence, victims of human trafficking who do not recognize that they are a victim, who do not identify as a victim, and those who are in denial that they are a victim. If you don't have patience, you will push them away, and that increases the risk of it getting worse. So now that I've told you a bit about my story, I've told you what I think providers need to know to be more effective in serving our community, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my own organization. As I said, I'm the co-founder and director of Now She Speaks. We provide public speaking engagements such as this. We love to be able to raise awareness. We provide training and education on domestic violence and human trafficking across the board. We have a 40-hour human trafficking case management training, a 40-hour domestic violence advocate training. We have a training on the 15 types of abuse, which I'll mention in a second. We also have a training on provider wellness, because us providers know that it is emotionally and mentally draining and heart-wrenching to be working with clientele who are actively experiencing abuse. We also develop trainings per request based on topics of interest, whether it be only for an hour or for a full day training. You can find us at nowshespeaks.org. I am also an independent consultant. I provide peer mentorship, professional development, speaking engagements, and independent consultant work. You can find my website at meghannsimpson.net. Spell my first name right, Meghann, Simpson, just like the show, .net. I would love to be connected to anyone who wants guidance, who would like peer support, who would like further education about this and the intersectionality of domestic violence and human trafficking. And lastly, I want to end with talking about the 15 types of abuse. How many in here, show of hands, knew that there were 15 types of abuse? I see no hands. That is why we need to raise more awareness. So I'm going to give you the list, but I'm not going to go into the details because I can cover that in the training that I would love to provide. There is psychological and mental abuse. Oftentimes they're interchangeable terms. There's physical abuse, emotional, verbal, sexual, financial, career, and education. There is technology-facilitated abuse. Exploitation has its own category because you can be exploited in multiple ways. There is neglect. There is social abuse. There is cultural abuse, spiritual and religious abuse, reproductive abuse, and lastly, the one that we always forget, pet abuse. Because when you're abusing our pets, you're manipulating and emotionally abusing us. So that is what I wanted to share today. I want everyone who has shared today to know that it takes courage to be vulnerable. Every single one of you has an insurmountable amount of courage to come up here and share your story, to push through the emotions, to tell us the truth. And I want you to take in that courage and strength that you had today to just speak however you did. Because we will no longer be silent. Now she speaks. Thank you.